This is the Watchman, giving another clarion call to the Brotherhood. And I wanted to speak to the ironclad topic that we warriors are pretty well versed in. That topic, of course, being gold and silver market rigging. Because some big statements, old and new, have recently been made or uncovered. Statements which further confirm what we already know to be true. Now, so far, though, it seems that some of these statements have gone somewhat under the radar, and they're too important to let it happen to them. And I'm making this video specifically because I wish to do everything in my power to keep that from happening. For instance, this week, GATA published a story about a speech discovered by Ronan Manley. This newly discovered speech was addressed to the IMF in 1981 by none other than Yale Zylstra, former president of the Bank for International Settlements. It doesn't get any higher on the food chain than that. Now, you'll recall that gold and silver had just finished spiking to the heavens the year before to roughly $800 and $50 per ounce, scaring the bankster cabal half to death. And this is why he felt the need to speak to his fellow crooks and admonish them in private about how to do things differently in the future. And this is what he said. Quote, "I feel that it's necessary for us within the Group of 10 in Switzerland to consider ways to regulate the price of gold, admittedly within fairly broad limits, so as to create conditions permitting gold sales and purchases between central banks as an instrument for a more rational management and deployment of their reserves. On the occasion of the annual meeting of the IMF in Belgrade in 1979, this was brought up, but regrettably, insufficient agreement could be reached to make even a modest start with regulating the gold price in the free market. It is my conviction that relatively small-scale interventions, though not forestalling the subsequent explosion in the gold price, would have at least reduced it to more manageable proportions. Now that the turbulent emotions seem to have quieted down, we would be wise to reflect anew and without prejudice on these subjects." End quote. That's quite telling, isn't it, folks? Gold spike was a problem for them to keep, quote, to manageable proportions. It would seem that since that time, his fellow banksters have taken his advice to heart and made gold's ascent much less turbulent this time around, at least so far. I'm not stopping there, though, for another occasion occurred in a much more recent speech where powerful truth was spoken, this time by a certain oil executive. Now, this man wrote a fascinating squib on the same topic, but interestingly, his reference to gold was sort of slipped into the framework of the article which he'd been writing to address the lack of freedom in the oil market. And I'd like to read several paragraphs of his piece to you so you can hear this man in his own words. Quote, "In 1985, investing in a new well was worthwhile if the oil it produced would fetch between $20 and $30 a barrel. Now, more oil comes from wells that are tricky and expensive to build. The break-even price is closer to $60 or $100. In today's distorted oil markets, prices do not reflect reality. They are driven instead by financial speculation, which outweighs the real-life factors of supply and demand. Financial markets tend to produce economic bubbles, and those bubbles tend to burst. Remember the dot-com bust and the subprime mortgage crisis? Furthermore, prices are prone to manipulation. We have not forgotten the rigging of the LIBOR interest rate benchmark and the gold price. We also need international action to make exchanges more transparent and to prevent price manipulation, similar to the measures taken against the LIBOR manipulators. Sharing market information, such as production and consumption values, prices and contract conditions, would make it harder for price distortions to persist. And we should make sure analysts at investment banks do not have hidden conflicts of interest. And the way he wraps it up for us brothers right here really ties the whole thing neatly together. Quote, "A true market for oil where prices reflect demand and supply is in the interest of producers and consumers alike. They should work to create one." End quote. Now, brothers, I can't say it any better than that. In just a few short lines, he encapsulated the angst and the frustration that stacking warriors and investors have felt in the gold and silver space for years. Prices stubbornly, perennially refuse to reflect supply and demand realities. The things he was describing in oil wells, if you'd replace the word oil wells with the words gold and silver mines, it would have been exactly, verbatim, the same thing we've been saying for years. And this man is incredibly clever. I mean, this guy managed to use the factual basis of LIBOR rigging, which, as we know, occurred for years, in order to utterly normalize his claim instantly that oil is not freely and fairly traded. He also used both of those facts to talk about the rigging of the gold price, which he basically brought out of nowhere. His method of attack? Brilliant, covert, and brutally effective. A guy after my own heart. Oh, there was another reason his piece was important. You see, because his name is Igor Sechin, the chief executive and chairman on the board of OJSC Rosneft. Yes, that Rosneft, a company probably second in importance only to Gazprom itself within the Russian energy sector. So here we have one of the highest ranking members in the Russian energy space, which we all know is a quasi-arm of Moscow and the Kremlin itself, affirming that gold and oil's markets are as sham-tastic as LIBOR's was, and in the Financial Times of London, no less. This is excellent. Now, brothers, at this point, there are tomes, nay, mountains, libraries of evidence, just from central bank documents themselves, on their meetings and admissions, that they view gold and silver as enemies of their system, their agenda, and their power. They cannot maintain the control that makes their agenda possible if these things were traded freely. Now, you and I, and this is critical, we've amassed a treasure trove of truth. And that's a two-edged sword, because the danger for stackers is that we can forget sometimes how utterly unknown and how revolutionary this knowledge truly is. It's easy to think that everyone knows about the things we're talking about. It's easy to think that everyone knows how vitally important gold and silver are in a crisis. It's easy to think that everyone out there knows these things aren't freely and fairly traded. It's easy to think that everyone knows that J.P. Morgan and the U.S. government are behind virtually every blessed waterfall attack in gold and silver at the COMEX Open every single business day. But they don't. They don't know this. All right? You and I are the remarkably minuscule exception to the rule. And we must repeat these things over and over and over again. For this reason, we must spread it everywhere. We must pepper the subconscious of everyone we know with this information, because while many of them might not understand or accept it, they can never unhear it. Their minds will have that truth inside, just germinating, waiting for the perfect moment to burst forth into blossom. And this is why I will continue to hammer this crime in progress until it is smashed to pieces forever. This is why I'll continue to oppose the most ruthless and wicked people in our generation, no matter the odds. It's up to you and I to proclaim truth when others will not do so. It is up to you and I to fearlessly shine truth's light upon the decrepit, cunning liars within the vast confines of monetary power. And it is up to you and I to protect ourselves, our families, and our livelihoods by doing the exact opposite of what these people expect and want us to do. Be the hero. Be bold. Be daring. Be unexpected. And be tireless in doing good. This is the Watchman signing off. Stay vigilant and bring the fight to them.